Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. This being a year before a presidential election, we are privileged to welcome some very big names to the program. This morning, former Vice President Mike Pence is our guest on Close Up. Mr. Vice President, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Adam. Great to be back.
So all this uncertainty in the banking sector right now, oddly enough, you have a little bit of experience opposing bank bailouts. In 2008, you were one of the few Republicans who stood up against the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP, against a Republican president.
We did.
To be clear, there's a difference between backstopping deposit and depositors with the FDIC and then making people whole, as the Biden administration just did here. So I'm curious, for your perspective, when you take the moral hazard away, when you give everybody all their money back, even if they took all the risk, what happens beyond just, stopping a panic?
Well, look, I honestly think if you decide that there are certain institutions that are too big to fail, then the unspoken part is that there's some institutions that are too small to care about. And the idea that we are going to raise fees on banks here in New Hampshire and back in my home in Indiana to pay for the excesses of SVB in California and Signature in New York, I just think it's antithetical to the principles of free market economics. You ought to be responsible and accountable for the decisions that you made. But I think what's happened here is a result. First, the backdrop is the failed economic policies of the Biden administration. The inflation at a 40-year high, the Federal Reserve is raising rates on a regular basis, looks like more may be coming. That's putting incredible pressure on banks. But when you layer in what appears to be the case with SVB, which is that they were very busy advancing what was known as an environmental, social, and governance agenda, ESG for short, that we've seen in major financial institutions in New York. It's making its way into corporate boardrooms. Essentially, it's advancing a liberal agenda at the expense of shareholders, at the expense of account holders, and at the end of the day, it looks like SVB in particular was engaged in an awful lot of left-wing politics as opposed to looking after their balance sheet. And now with one more bailout from the Biden administration, there won't be any consequences for that. And to me, that is an agenda that we simply need to confront in the marketplace today. But with a bailout for SVB, it won't occur on this one.
15 years ago, and even more recently, the idea is, and the argument is, well, we're preventing something far worse from happening.
Right.
Do you think a president will ever allow those consequences to happen, to let that market play itself out in the potential for economic devastation? Herbert Hoover was a one-term president for a reason.
Yeah, look, I appreciate you mentioning back in 2008, I was one of the leaders of the effort in the Congress to oppose the Wall Street bailout. But it wasn't that we didn't want to do anything. What Congress ended up doing was writing a blank check of $800 billion to these big Wall Street investment firms that had played fast and loose with the secondary mortgage market. What we wanted to do was what we had done, as some of your viewers may remember, back in the savings and loan crisis of more than a decade earlier, and that was identify where the problems are, do a workout on a bank-by-bank basis. It was pennies on the dollar to the taxpayer, and it held those institutions accountable for their poor choices. But a bailout, as you see with SVB and Signature today, as you saw with the Wall Street bailout, there's simply no consequences for bad choices, and the people that get the bill are people at banks like the one you and I bank at, me in Indiana, you here in New Hampshire. And I just think at the end of the day, the bailout should be off the table. What we ought to do is address these issues in a real world, in a specific and a constructive way. That didn't happen here.
We've asked you about January 6th every time you've been here. I thought this visit we might be able to get beyond that, but it's back in the headlines yet again for a couple of reasons. I want to ask you first about this effort among leaders in the conservative movement and in media to portray January 6th as kind of a hapless tourist incident. What do you think are the consequences of trying to make it look more innocent, what happened that day? Does that increase the risk of future political violence?
Adam, January 6th was a tragic day in the life of our nation's capital. And I will never minimize what happened that day. 140 law enforcement officers were injured. Ultimately, lives were lost. I don't doubt that there were some people that were caught up in the surging crowds and never engaged in vandalism or violence in the Capitol building. But from that day forward, I have called on those who did engage in violence and did engage in threats against public officials, including me and my family, be held to the strictest account of the law, and they have been. I just think at the end of the day, the American people deserve all the facts. I'd like to see the videos that were released to Fox News Network. I'd like to see them released to the American people broadly. I thought the January 6th committee in the Congress over the last 2 years was a missed opportunity because they didn't look at the full range of issues, like the lack of deployment of additional law enforcement personnel. There's some senior members of the committee staff now that admit that they didn't look very carefully on how they dropped the ball on intelligence that suggested that there could be violence that day. Having lived through it, I think the American people have a right to know what happened that day. But the reality is, as we all saw unfold on live television, that what happened that day was a disgrace at our Capitol building, but ultimately a day of tragedy became a triumph of freedom, because thanks to law enforcement's courage, we quelled the violence, we reconvened the same day, and finished our work under the Constitution of the United States.
You've recently said that history will hold Donald Trump accountable for his actions on January 6th. He turned that around on you and said, quote, in many ways you can blame him for January 6th. Not the least bit of hesitation here to throw you under the bus, and yet you are refusing to comply with a subpoena to have you testify potentially against him in a special counsel investigation. I'm just curious, this guy is doing nothing to protect you, and you are essentially protecting him by doing that. Why?
Well, what I'm protecting is the Constitution of the United States, just as I did on January 6th, just as I've always sought to do throughout my public career. The idea of the Justice Department subpoenaing a vice president for testimony about their conduct as president of the Senate and conversations with the president, I believe is unconstitutional. And it's unprecedented. It's never happened before in American history.
And yet January 6th is unprecedented. I mean, don't you think that if history is going to judge, that it should have the full account and the full measure in the courts? Well,
and look, I've spoken very openly about what happened that day. I've written a great length, as you've been kind enough to look at my book, So Help Me God. And I expect to one degree or another I'll be talking about it in part the rest of my life. But I really do believe that it's essential that we stand on the Constitution as written. I did it that day on January 6th. I believed it was clear what my duty was, to preside over opening and counting electoral votes. I did it when Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer tried to misuse the 25th Amendment a week later in a punitive manner against the president, and we're doing it in this. I'm limited in what I can say about that matter at this point in time, but I hope if people look at my career, they'll always see that to the best of my ability, I've always sought to keep my oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. The separation of powers principle enshrined there in this instance is of enormous importance to our government, and I'll always do that, so help me God.
Let's shift gears here. In states that have banned abortion, some state legislatures are considering punitive measures for women who choose to terminate pregnancies. In South Carolina, you've got 21 co-sponsors on a bill to allow the death penalty for women who have abortions. Do you think those lawmakers are on the right track?
Look, I really believe that the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe versus Wade gave America a new beginning for life by returning the question of abortion to the states and to the American people. And while if I was in Washington in any capacity, I'd support pro-life measures as a pro-life American, I believe it's most likely this is going to be resolved on a state-by-state basis. And I just trust the American people and their elected representatives to sort that out. But I'm always going to be a champion for restoring the sanctity of life to the center of American law. But I'll also be a champion for showing compassion to women that are facing crisis pregnancies, women that have endured an abortion, and in many cases later in life endure what psychologists call post-abortion stress syndrome. we ought to show not only the principle of commitment to life in this country, but we ought to show compassion, real compassion to women facing crisis pregnancies. And that, I think, ultimately is how we heal our land and move back to being a culture of life.
Is it encouraging a culture of life, though, to propose the death penalty for women who get abortions?
I must tell you that I'm not familiar with those proposals, and I don't have a way of responding to that or confirming it. But what I can tell you is I think committing to the sanctity of life, cherishing newborns as much as the unborn, and is the pathway forward for us to restore the sanctity of life to the center of American law.
As we wrap up here quickly, in your book, you grew up in an Irish Catholic family, which in the 1960s generally means you're a Democrat, and you were for a while.
I was.
You supported Jimmy Carter in 1976 and also in 1980. That was quite the fun fact to learn, that you actually voted against Reagan in 80. But, you know, Carter became something of a political punchline through his presidency, but, you know, really through his works and his life and his faith demonstrated a tremendous goodness and decency. I'm just curious what you think about, you know, you don't see a lot of Jimmy Carters out there in our politics anymore. What does it say and what does it portend for our nation that the Jimmy Carters of the world are now essentially laughed out of politics?
Well, thanks for pointing out I was a Democrat when I was younger. And look, I honor every man and woman that steps forward in public service, especially the people that have served as President of the United States. His was a failed presidency that laid a foundation for the Reagan Revolution, but he was a good man and is a good man of genuine faith. Our prayers are with his family today as he faces perhaps what may well be his final days. But I would take slight issue with what you said, Adam. I actually think that one of the things the American people long for, as I've traveled around New Hampshire and around the country, is not just a return to the policies of the Trump-Pence administration, a strong military, less taxes, more American energy, conservatives on our courts, America standing tall in the world and having free and fair trade. But also, I think the American people want us to return to the civility that characterized our politics not so long ago. And I truly do believe that, you know, the American people actually get along with one another pretty well most days of the week. They show a lot of respect for people of diverse views. And what I hear is that people long for a government as good as our people, a government that's as principled, as patriotic, but also reflects the civility the American people show one another just about every day.
Mr. Vice President, thanks for joining us here on Close Up. We'll see you out there in New Hampshire on the trail, maybe in the future.
Thanks, Adam.
All right.